I understand some people have more than others. That's always going to be there. And you even, we started off this evening talking about the auto show and about how the crazy competition just led to these crazy, crazy cars. And I know sometimes it goes astray, but for the most part, it's the best system we have. There's something that's come up in this country that didn't used to exist, which is envy. And it's a big issue. And it was understood back in the day, and we are empowering. We're now dealing with the first wave of participation trophy. My own fecal matter doesn't stink. Empowered. I feel so fucking good about myself. Everybody's a winner. There's no losers. We are dealing with the first wave of those fucking assholes. That's who we're dealing with now. Because this has been going on for about 25 years, and we're just starting to get maybe 20 years, and those kids were 8 or 9 years old. And we're getting the first...
Is that the millennials? I think that's the name for these.
I call them the ass douches. We created a bunch of fucking self-entitled monsters. Mm-hmm. And this has become the pursuit of my life, where people are so far out of it and what they expect and what they think realistic is and what the set of rules that pertains to them versus the other guys, because that's what the bottom line is. I want my most valuable player trophy. Well, you're the slowest, fattest guy on the team. Why should he get one and I don't get one? Because he busts his ass and he runs a 4.440. That's why he gets one. Well, this is bullshit. And then everyone gets involved, and then everyone gives everyone a participation trophy, and then everyone feels good about themselves. But it's not based on anything. You should feel good about yourself because of your accomplishments, not because somebody yelled at you to feel good about yourself and you got a fucking fake piece of plastic that was sprayed gold and had your name on a plaque on the bottom of it. And when these folks become adults and enter the workforce, and they've done stories about this, how you can't treat them, the boss can't yell, hey, let's go. Let's get back to work now. And, you raised your voice to me. You better watch your tone, buddy. My dad's a lawyer. I'll sue your ass. I'll take this company. Self-entitled pricks who think the world owes them a living. And now we're getting the first wave of these douchebags. And now they grew up. And it's fine if you grow up in this little snow globe of a life where everything is awesome and everyone gets a participation trophy and there's snowing. No losers. Well, when you get shaken up and everything's awesome. But then you get out into the real world and you realize I'm a fucking loser. You're not doing that well. You're not making that much money. There's no more participation trophies. This is the fucking LA Auto Show. You don't get to sit around and go, hey, here's my piece of shit I worked on. Everyone, why aren't you guys buying it? And then, instead of finding a fucking mirror and finding the reason why no one's buying your car, you just want to run around and yell at everyone else who's selling cars. And now you want to take shit and throw it at the cars because you want to fuck their cars up. Because that's what's going on. It's like, instead of looking in the mirror and go, why the fuck am I not doing better? You just find some guys got more shit than you and go, hey man, what do you need all that shit for? It's the same version of, hey man, what do you need an MVP trophy for? Because I bust my ass. That's why. Or maybe I'm just genetically better than you. Either way, buddy, I got the trophy. So shut the fuck up and get the fuck back to work, or better yet, on the bench where you belong. This is what's going on. So they're feeling shame. They've been shamed by life because they haven't been prepared for life. They've been had so much smoke blown up their fucking collective asses by the time they get out in the real world, and they realize the real world doesn't give a fuck where you're from or what your mommy said you were or how pretty you are or what you do. They don't give a fuck what anyone, and all those lies that were told to your parents about how special you are and how no one was created like you, and all this bullshit advertising with Nike and all this, like, it's just one you and you take it all and it's your world and all that Reebok shit doesn't mean shit when you get to the real world and you're just looked at as peon number 27 who's putting in an application, and guess what? I don't like your attitude, douche. Get your fucking feet off my desk and hit the bricks. I'm not hiring you. Then now your plan is to come back and throw a brick at my window. That's your plan. This is what's going on. It's this envy and shame, and there's going to be a lot more of it. Because it used to be, back in the day, father would be walking his son down the sidewalk, and you'd see a guy go by in a Rolls Royce, and the father would say, there goes Mr. Jenkins. look up to him. That guy works hard. That guy built a company. That guy built an empire. Now look at him. He's got his Rolls Royce. He's driving up the hill. But what do we do now? Now it's like, oh, look at him. Look at him. Does he need that car?
Yeah.
Why does he need that car? I'm driving a fucking Chevette. Why does he get to drive that fucking car? You know, let's go up there and throw a rock at it. That ain't going to help you get out of the Chevette, ass douche.
That's right.
Get the fuck to work.
Douches.
And by the way, parents, society, we are creating a group of self-entitled monsters.
Well,
knock it off. We started, we have these weird swings in raising kids, and they're not very good. I mean, I grew up in the sort of 70s, just free to be me, you and me. Hey, man, if he doesn't want to learn to read, he doesn't have to learn to read. Yeah, just run wild, free range, do your own thing, man. That whole hippie, do your own thing, never fucking panned out. Mm-mm. And the super self-esteem building and just all this bullshit where we have to knock down a Christmas celebration, call it a holiday celebration so we don't offend the one kid whose parents are litigious or whatever. We fucked our society up royally. We basically taken that one kid and empowered him, and we've got to stop because that's what all this is. But you took guys who built something and you said, there's a guy who's accomplished something, not, well, why isn't he paying his fair share? I mean, when did that ever fucking come about? Mm-hmm. That guy paid in millions of dollars last year. You paid in shit, and you're pissed at him? Obviously, it doesn't make sense. Obviously, it's not a rational thought. It's shame-driven. And you want to extrapolate this. This is essentially what the terrorists do with us. They see us over here in our hot tubs, driving our big cars around, having our parties, and they're like, fuck it, Allah's going to take care of these guys, and then Allah doesn't take care of shit, and then they come down and blow our buildings up. It's this weird, it's not, we think it's about religion or we think it's about, cultures. It's one culture can't live next to another culture that's thriving without getting pissed off, envious, resentful. You then get shamed. And when you get shamed, there's two things you can do with shame. You can be shamed and go, I better get my shit together. Or you can be shamed and go, I'm going to tear that guy's shit down. And that's where we're at now. Mm-hmm. When you feel that shame, get your shit together. Leave my shit alone.
Yeah, it's like global sibling rivalry.
Thank you. That's what it is. It's old. It's as old as the Bible.
Good day, everyone. This is Grizzly Rising, and I am reporting from behind enemy lines. I hope everybody's doing well. I've finally moved into my new cave. I got my new mic set up, and I will be doing videos on a regular basis shortly. I got a lot of plans for 2020, and I will get into them later. But right now, I am doing a response to the truth behind the OK Boomer meme by Lycantheory. Now, before we get started, and I get started on this critique, let me set a couple of ground rules. Don't go comment bomb the guy's channel. I disagree with Lycantheory on some things, but I agree with him on other things. He's not a bad guy, we just have a difference of opinion on this particular subject. So with that being said, and without further ado, let's get started on this video.
From Lycantheory, Philosophy and Commentary. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about the OK Boomer meme. A lot of people, they kind of decry, that millennials are, spoiled and entitled, right? And they don't know, the meaning of a good day's work and all this shit, right? And basically, people make fun of millennials for not, like they're basically not following society's rules, right, and doing things that they're supposed to do. You have the boomers and...
Okay, well, getting to that whole comment about people think of millennials as being lazy, self-entitled slackers, precious little snowflakes that get triggered by any little thing. I hate to say it, that is true. I know it's a stereotype, but stereotypes exist for a reason, and that's because they're based on truth. Now, of course, this is not all millennials. Go back to my introduction where I put up like the 10 million disclaimers, and read the one where it says I speak in a general way for further reference. But yeah, most millennials are kind of self-entitled. They think they should start as the CEO of the company and work their way down to the newsroom guy, or the mailroom guy, I'm sorry. And they're special little snowflakes. I mean, they act like, they're entitled to everything. They do have a serious case of self-entitlement. I mean, it's pretty evident. Just go back to that clip I played of Adam Carolla going in on millennials. He's right. Every little thing triggers them. They get upset over the most inconsequential, minor things possible. For example, a lot of comedians have stopped doing gigs on college campuses because the snowflakes get triggered by their comedy. Excuse me. A lot of these millennials think, I should, be making six figures with a degree in gender studies or English lit or some other bullshit college degree, and I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, the stereotype is typically true. Once again, not all millennials, but yeah, they are self-entitled. They're spoiled. They were brought up in a bubble. They never had to really face any adversity growing up as a kid. They've never had to really deal with losing, failing, being disappointed, because their parents, coincidentally enough, which were the baby boomers, sheltered them from that. Hence the term Generation Participation Trophy, or the Participation Trophy generation. That's the millennials. All right, let's continue on.
And then you have the Gen Xers who, kind of play this superiority game with millennials, trying to kind of presume like they do things the right way, and they're in the right. And the millennials, they're just they're just dumbasses who don't know what they're doing, right? Well, as I've said before, if you want someone to blame for the millennials' behavior,
yeah, Gen Xers are typically right. And I'm a Gen Xer. I was born in 1970. We don't lord it over millennials. Quite frankly, we get irritated as fuck with them. That's the thing, because millennials, and I'll probably allude to this later on in the response. Millennials act like they're the only generation that's ever had it hard, that they're the only ones that have ever had any challenges, or have had to start out at a deficit, which is the furthest thing from the truth. Every generation, including the boomers, have started out with some sort of challenge, or at some sort of deficit, or they had to surmount some very difficult obstacle. For the greatest generation, the World War II generation, they had to survive the Great Depression. There was no welfare. There wasn't any EBT or Section 8 housing or any of that other bullshit. You either worked and you earned money, or you starved to death and died. The boomers, yeah, and I'll get to the boomers in a minute, but the boomers, well, some of them had the Vietnam War as a big obstacle for them. And when I do get into my criticism of the boomers, I'm not referring to the baby boomers that went to Vietnam and got treated like shit when they came back. Alright, let's continue.
You really need only look at the baby boomers. Not only did the baby boomers give birth to the millennials, but they actually taught them. They taught them like how to be. Speaking real here, there's a real reason why that happened. It wasn't just like, oh, the baby boomers were totally fine, they did things by the book, and still they raised a generation of entitled little idiots, right? That's not how it was. That's not the real story. What happened was a third of the population of that generation basically bucked society's norms, and they decided to just do their own thing. And they partook in drugs, and they bucked authority, and they did all of this stuff, right? That's why, people, when we look back on hippies, people hate hippies, right? Because they were annoying, they just smoked weed all day, they were bums, right? Those were the boomers. But again, it's important to distinguish that wasn't all the boomers. That was like a third of the boomers. Okay, a third. Now, whatever caused this, whether it was just normal societal change, like we did come back from a war, right? And people who were born basically in the 20s and 30s, they were born into poverty a lot of the time. They didn't really have much. So when they got all these benefits from the government after the war, all they had to do was get a job, and then they were basically confirmed to have a house.
Okay, for one thing, he's missing a lot of stuff when he talks about the Greatest Generation. And I know a little bit about the Greatest Generation because my dad was a member of the Greatest Generation. He told me stories about the Great Depression, about the hardships, about the fact that food was scarce, work was scarce, and that it was pretty much a fight for survival. I mean, my dad, and I've told the story before on live streams, my dad told me about how he came up with his recipe for hobo hash, or what was it? I think it was, railroad hash. I'm sorry. It was hobo hash, railroad hash, it's the same thing. And he came up with the recipe for railroad hashes because when he was a kid, his mom used to have people that hop the railroads, the hobos, they would hop the trains, they would come and ask for work, for money. And she said she couldn't pay him any money, so what she did was she took all the leftovers out of the refrigerator, threw them into a frying pan, put some onions in there, threw some potatoes in there, and put some eggs on top of it and called it railroad hash. And instead of paying them money, what she did was she gave them a meal, let them sleep in the barn for a night, then they took off the next day. So, yeah, the Greatest Generation went through absolute hell during the Great Depression. I mean, they lost family members, they lost their parents. A lot of them, some of them were homeless. I remember one Greatest Generation member telling me he was so happy when he got into the military because that was the first time he ever got a hot shower. These people also, in the, I guess it's the Southwest, around Oklahoma, the Midwest, they went through the Dust Bowl. Basically everything turned to dust. I mean, they couldn't grow crops, they couldn't, grow food. They were destitute. Now, getting back to this piece about where they, after World War II, they got out of the military and they got all this welfare, and they could just walk into a job. For one thing, it wasn't welfare. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to correct you though, Lycantheory, it wasn't welfare at all. It was a gift. Because these guys that survived World War II, which was a hellacious war, nothing's compared to it before and nothing's compared to it since then. These guys basically saved the world. They saved the world from Nazi Germany. They saved the world from Imperial Japan. And when they got back, they got the GI Bill. And the GI Bill basically let them buy a house. And they went to college. And that GI Bill, I gotta tell you, that wasn't a handout. That was a fucking thank you. That was a thank you for saving the world. I believe somewhere around 300,000 American men lost their lives during World War II. It might be more. If someone has the correct number, please by all means correct me. But it was a lot. It was a hellacious fight. And the reason why they were able to just get out of the military and walk into a job was because the only industries that were left standing were in America. Let's look at the facts. Europe was bombed into the ground. It was bombed to fucking dust. Thank you, Mother Green and her killing machine, for bombing Germany to dust. The Germans bombed France in the dust. England survived, but it was crippled because of the loss of manpower and the loss of industry from the bombings. Soviet Union was under communism, and they had most of their stuff bombed out. Japan was bombed into dust, and the other countries really didn't have that much of an industrial capacity to begin with. So America was literally the last one standing, and that's where most of the world was getting the stuff from, was America. So yeah, there were jobs available working on an assembly line, working in factories. And of course, this was long before we went into the service economy, known as the servitude economy in some circles. So jobs were aplenty. Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely. And that's why the Greatest Generation was able to come out and get jobs and become middle class and live in relative prosperity. It was just a circumstance at the time. Now, of course, that degraded over years as these countries rebuilt themselves, as Japan rebuilt itself, and as American industry became complacent, it started getting competition from Europe and Japan, especially in the automotive sector. But that's a discussion for another day. But no, it wasn't welfare. It was a thank you. It was a thank you for literally saving the world. So, Lycantheory, you're totally wrong about that. You might want to try to find if you can find any members of the greatest generation that are still alive and talk to them and get the skinny about that.
And they could buy clothes and food for their family, and they could have more and more kids. And, you know, they had every reason to, right? You could make a living with one job back then. Nowadays, you can't do that. So,
well, and this gets more into why that the baby boom generation is called the baby boom generation. You know, that the reason why I call it the baby boom is because after these veterans got back from World War II, they were just happy to be alive. I mean, they're like, holy shit, we survived. We didn't die. We didn't get our fucking limbs blown off. You know, we didn't lose an eye or receive other traumatic injuries. So they got with the women, and what happens is when there's a scarcity of men, women are going to get together with whoever they can. So they all got together, they had sex, and then they had a bunch of kids. That's why it's called the baby boom, because that generation came from the result of people getting together after World War II and having a bunch of kids.
So, you know, is it any wonder why millennials, you know, they can't get it together? Because they need to have like 2, 3 fucking jobs just to be able to pull in the same required income to be able to afford a house.
Are you fucking kidding me? Are you serious? Really? Are you kidding me? Gen X, when we were coming up, a lot of my friends, they were either going to school or working part-time. Many of them were working full-time and going to school part-time. Some of them were working full-time. They had 2 part-time jobs. And a lot of Gen Xers, when they were starting out, they had 2 or 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet. You're not terminally unique, dude. You are not terminally unique. Millennials are not terminally unique in that regard. That's just garden variety. Gen Xers, we had to work our asses off to make it when we were young. And I'll tell you a story, a personal story. When I got out of the Navy, I went to job retraining. I went to learn computer repair. I went to a computer trade school because at the time, the community colleges didn't have any sort of computer program except for a computer science program. And I wasn't interested in learning how to design a microchip. I just wanted to fix the computers. And on a side note, community colleges and your standard issue university, and no, I'm not talking about MIT, dumbasses. Your standard universities and community colleges are 10 to 20 years behind the rest of America because professors are so rigid and complacent, they're unwilling to change their paradigm about anything. Anyway, I did well in the course. It was a hard course. We had to do shit like learn how to count in binary, octal, and hex. We had to learn a lot of background theory. And fortunately for me, though, I had a background in electronics, so I did very well as I was at the top of my class. I had to put in over 100 resumes. I got maybe 3 or 4 job interviews, and I got one job working at a piece of shit computer store ran by a hot-headed guy, his dysfunctional piece of crap, lazy wife, who was supposed to be doing collections, but all she did was sit on her butt all day and play computer games. So that was my story. My big break came when I got a job with a real company, working for a temp agency, making $8 an hour. What I did was, I worked my fucking ass off, I was good at my job, I was consistent, and I ended up getting promoted. So this whole thing about, oh, you know, these guys gotta work like 3 jobs and just to make it and just to afford an apartment and make ends meet is fucking bullshit. And as far as that goes, if you can't rent your own apartment, do like what the rest of people do. Get some fucking roommates. You know, share an apartment. Deal with it. You know, like the snowflake and bullshit about, well, they can't afford this. No, stop. Stop. Just give me a fucking break, okay? It's fucking patently absurd.
But the boomers, when they were split into those, you know, those 2 categories where you had like basically the hippie generation and then you had the boomers who more or less followed the prescribed way of doing things. They were still conservative. They were still having families. They were doing all this stuff, right, that normal people did, normal, quote unquote, right? Nowadays, we don't know what normal is because everything's changed. Now, let me ask you guys, okay? How much of the population has to change for a societal change to really take hold? 10%.
Okay, let me give you a correction on that, Lycantheory. When you're talking about the boomers, you have the early boomers, the ones that were born 1946, grew up in the 50s, yada yada yada. Then you have the late bloomers that were born in the late 50s, early 60s. And don't forget, we have another category of boomers, the ones that went to Vietnam. The ones that went to Vietnam absolutely got fucking wrecked by that war. And part of the reason why they got wrecked was, as opposed to previous wars, because the previous wars, when you came home, you were generally on a ship for 4 to 6 weeks, traveling overseas, and you had time to sit with your fellow compatriots and talk about stuff and go over, how you miss your friends, the battles you fought, and you were able to process that information. But the Vietnam vets, they were home within 24 hours, so they didn't have time to talk it out and talk about their experiences, so they had really bad PTSD. On top of the physical injuries, on top of the fact that when they came home, they had lib trader scumbags throwing fruit at them, calling them baby killers, and it's all sorts of other foul names, terms, and phrases. Then you have the boomers that were born in the late 50s and early 60s. That they're generally associated with the me generation. They're generally, along with the boomers that died in the draft or were lucky enough not to go to Vietnam, they're the ones that are the pieces of shit. And I do agree with Lycantheory. Baby boomers are pieces of shit for the most part. And once again, if it doesn't apply, let it fly. Not all, but enough. And those piece of shit boomers, which is the majority of them, they're pigs. They're fucking pigs. They gobble up everything. They consume everything. They take everything for themselves. They don't want to leave nothing behind for the other generations. They just want it all for them. They just want to live comfortable, easy lives. They want to sit at the fucking hog trough and gobble and consume everything. And I'll give you an example of that because, Lycantheory talks about how it's so hard for these millennials and they got to work 3 jobs and all this other bullshit. But getting back to me, when I was getting started out in computers, the reason why I couldn't get an entry-level job doing computer repair was because the fucking boomers that work for the defense industry were taking all the entry-level computer jobs due to the fact that the Soviet Union collapsed and there was no longer a need for these aerospace companies and these defense companies to hire as many people. So these 40-something at the time boomers were taking all the jobs meant for people like me back in the early 90s. So once again, don't give me that bullshit about, fucking millennials are the only ones that have ever had it hard or have ever had to struggle with anything or have ever had to go through any trials and tribulations. Every generation's had its own trial and tribulation. And I'm not saying that to diminish millennials. I'm just saying that because it's the truth. But yeah, there are different categories of boomers. But yeah, most of the boomers, they're a bunch of hogs. They don't share. They're selfish. They're greedy. They're very non-confrontational. They want to live in relative comfort and ease. And they don't want to have to deal with any adversity or stress. All right, let's continue on.
Percent. Okay, maybe 15, maybe 20, whatever, right? The point is, a small enough part of the population changes, and that actually takes root, and it changes other generations down the line. Okay, it has an effect. All right, so the changes that were taking place in the 50s, where it would basically turn into the hippie 60 generation with the smoking drugs and the free sex and all that stuff, that basically took hold, especially with the advent of feminism and equal rights and all that shit. That took hold in our society, and it.
Well, he is right about that though, because in the 50s they didn't call them hippies; they called them beatniks. That's what they called them in the 50s, is beatniks. So he is right. The whole hippie thing, it kind of began in the 50s. The genesis of it began in the 50s. That's when the rotten egg, if you will, started forming. All right, continuing.
It basically spread, like a virus. And everyone was like, yeah, this is good, because it was an addictive thought to have a free way of life and just do whatever the fuck you wanted, right? Everyone wants to do whatever the fuck they want. Everyone. There's no exception. No one wants to be held back and be like, if I told JB, for example, hey JB, you can't do any more drugs, you can't have any more sex, you gotta do things the right way and find yourself a nice, conservative woman to settle down with. You think he would listen? No. JB's gonna do what JB wants to fucking do. If I told anyone else, hey, you gotta do this, would they listen? No. So we're all kind of like libtarded like that nowadays. We all exist in this kind of, we are all the product of the hippie boomer generation. And if you want someone to blame for the spoiled entitled millennials, I mean, just look at the fucking hippie boomers
Well, that's not necessarily true, because if you look at Gen X is predominantly fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Now, getting back to this whole thing, and I've kind of thought about this a lot, is that the generation, like for example, Gen X was raised by the what's it called, the silent generation. That's right. That's the generation preceding the greatest generation. And if you look at it, they're kind of a mirror in many aspects. Gen Xers tend to be very fiscally conservative and socially liberal, whereas millennials are just flat out borderline communists. But a lot of the millennials were raised by boomers. Gen Xers were raised predominantly by the silent generation. In my case, I was raised by a person from the greatest generation. So I'm a whole different Megillah right there when it comes to that stuff. But yeah, it does make sense. But still, here's the thing: you can't blame your parents for everything in life. Millennials cannot blame their boomer parents for the reason why they turned out to be so fucked up. Because yeah, you got a shitty deal, so did Gen X. But when it comes to that, it's up to the individual to change any bad habits or anything that they're doing that's causing them problems, or change what they're not doing and better themselves so they can have a good quality of life. And I came out a little rough, and I do apologize for that. But yeah, it's on you. You're adults now. Change. You say you're talking about, well, the boomers raised us to be this. Well, you could change. It's not easy. It's certainly not the most fun thing to do, but it's entirely possible to just change. Change. I mean, that's it. That's all there is to it, is just change. Better yourself. Take contrary action. Don't use the boomers raised us this way as a crutch, as a justification for your shitty behavior.
That basically changed this whole society into what it is today. I just wanted to get into just a small little discussion just to spark some conversation. I am not hoping to get out everything I want to say on this. Maybe I'll stream about this, but just to kind of get my thoughts out there so you guys, kind of know where my head is at. By the way, I forgot the whole okay boomer thing. The reason that people say okay boomer, and millennials mostly, is because they're usually encountered by an argument by a baby boomer or someone of the same kind of argument. Let's say a Gen Xer will bring the same arguments to the table, like, why don't you just get a job? Why don't you just get out there and work for a living? Then maybe you can actually support yourself and actually, bring in a decent income and blah, 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 and you'll have everything that the baby boomers had. Again, as I made the point in this video, that's not the case, because you have to get 1, 2, 3 fucking jobs to even be able to support yourself in that way. Now, do I have that issue personally? Not really. I don't have a family to support. If I went out and bought myself a place, or stayed in an apartment, I would have no problem looking after myself. Now, looking after some kids and a wife, on the other hand, would be a different story entirely. That would probably make me on the poverty level, and that's not how it was for the baby boomers. They had benefits from the government. You could also just walk into a store without a college degree and just get yourself a fucking job, and it wasn't a big deal. Nowadays, you need all these things to be able to make a decent income, to be able to support yourself and a family. So I hope that kind of clears things up as far as the OK Boomer thing. I myself don't really partake in the OK Boomer, back and forth, but I can understand the points of it and why it's said. And again, I probably will be streaming about this at a certain point as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that shit. And I'll see you guys next time.
Okay, well, that's bullshit too. I've never heard a Gen Xer tell a millennial just to go get a job. What I would tell a millennial or a young kid coming up is, if he's a man, if you're going to go to college, get into a STEM field, get into a field of study that's going to be able to get you a decent job once you get out the door. I say, for those kids, go to community college, do your general education stuff there for a fraction of the price of a university, and transfer to a university or a state college. And getting back to his thing about saying, well, he doesn't have that problem. He would be able to go out and run an apartment without any problems. He wouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs. And let me ask you, Lycantheory, what are you doing? How come you were able to go out and rent an apartment without any problem? What's the difference between you and other millennials? Do you have a specific skill set? Do you have a skill set that's marketable and makes you money? And let's talk about that for a minute. You see a lot of these millennials, they complain they have to work at Starbucks or a grocery store or some other fucking bullshit, right? But what kind of training do they have? Let's say they have a college degree. What's their college degree? Gender studies, English lit, underwater basket weaving, or transgender medieval folk dancing, or some other worthless liberal arts fucking degree bullshit? Or do they have like a STEM degree, or even a degree in business or accounting? What's their training? Did they go to a trade school? Do they have marketable trade school like auto mechanics or construction? Are they electricians? I mean, let's drill this down a little bit instead of just saying, well, they got to work 3 jobs and blah blah blah. And then he talks about, well, he'd be at the poverty level if he had to support a family. Dude, most people start out with a family and they struggle. If you're a young person, which is not so much nowadays because families are on the decline, thank you feminists and live trader scum. But when a young couple started out a family, they did struggle. That's been the way it's been since forever. That's normal. Now let me ask the other question: starting out a family, are these millennials thinking that they should, when they start a family, that they should have all the luxuries and doodads in a big house? The luxury car, the right appliances, basically keeping up with the Joneses? Or do they understand that, if you're a young person and a young couple starting out, it's going to be a little tough and you're going to have to be a little more resourceful, and maybe you are going to have to work a full-time job and get a part-time job to make ends meet until you can build yourself up? That's the same with Gen X. I mean, my best friend, when he started his family out, we got married and now he's divorced, of course. In 1996, he and his wife struggled. They rented out an apartment. He didn't buy a house until just a couple of years ago. So once again, you guys, you millennials, you're not terminally unique. It's not just you. Everybody's had to go through that struggle. So yeah, I mean, and this should be a lesson going forward to everybody, especially the Generation Zers that are coming of age. 1, learn a marketable job skill, whether it's a STEM degree or business or accounting or something of that nature, or learn a trade. And in fact, learn multiple trades. Get marketable job skills, be frugal when you're young, realize that you don't have to keep up with the Joneses, and do what everybody else is. Build yourself up. You're young. You should have boundless energy, drive, and motivation to do that. And a young person in their 20s, you're goddamn right, they should be working 2 jobs, or if not working 2 jobs, working a full-time job and going to school part-time. You're supposed to be able to do that at your age. I mean, fuck, when I was in the Navy, I was working, there were some days where I was working 20 hours a day. And I had to get up and do it all over again. I mean, I was going to school part-time and working full-time. If you're a young man coming up in this world, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to borrow it from Mumia Obsidian Ali, you should be working 60 hours a week, and if you're not working 60 hours a week, you should be working 40 hours a week, and that other 20 hours should be spent in job training or getting your education. So that ran aside. That's it for the video. Once again, I don't have any beef with Lycantheory. I just disagree with him. He did make some very good, valid points. I agree with him on the boomers. They are scumfucks for the most part, with few exceptions. They're selfish, they're greedy. They gobble up everything for themselves and leave nothing behind for anybody else. I do disagree with him on the whole millennial thing, and it's more of not so much an overall disagreement, just general points that he brought up. And I'll say this again as well. Don't go comment bomb his channel. Don't troll him. Don't fuck with him. Like I said, it's not that kind of dance. I'm just making a response video, and I'm just having a disagreement with him on this particular issue. That is all. This is Grizzly Rising. I am reporting from behind enemy lines. I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.